Year 13 at the CYCA and particularly the Blue Water point score. For those of you who don't know me, my name is John Cameron, the Vice Commodore of the club at this time. We have an interesting evening set aside for you to go through and look at the various bits and pieces that you're required to know for the Blue Water point score. We'll start the evening by introducing Roads and Maritime, Drew Jones, Glenn Furness and Rex Cresswell. Drew's going to give us a talk about what's required by Roads and Maritime and what various bits and pieces we do. We'll also touch upon the International Fleet Review, which is about to come upon us very shortly. I'll introduce Drew Jones.
Can everybody hear me okay? I'd prefer not to use the microphone if possible, so if you can hear me up the back all right, and I can move around. All good? Fantastic. Good evening, folks. As John said, I'm with Maritime. I was a boating safety officer until recently. I'm now the Senior Special Aquatic Events Officer, so I look after the event organisation from a maritime perspective, so that's why I'm here to talk to you about the IFR that's coming up. The last few years we've been doing safety briefs at the major yacht clubs around the harbour with the annual briefings for the skippers pre-season. We've been going around and just going through a few of the different things that we'd like the members and the clubs to remember when you're out there racing. Last year I got heckled and told that, you tell us the same thing every year, why are we here, blah, blah, blah. So this year we come out with footage to back up the reason why we actually come out and talk to you every year. So, Jason, if you wouldn't mind, thank you. So this footage you're going to look at, sorry about the quality, it's pretty lousy. It does break up every now and then, but it's actually my camera held in front of a computer screen from the ferry control centre. The footage is taken from the FLIR camera, the forward-looking infrared camera on the roof of one of the man-made ferries. That, as you can see, is heading east down the harbour here, basically heading towards Shark Island. Now, you'd all be familiar with the ferries and the paths they take and that sort of stuff, and also, of course, the requirement to keep at least 200 metres away from the bow of the ferries and 30 metres either side. Now, unfortunately, when I was taking down getting the footage like this, it eliminated most of the sound. As I was starting this footage, there was 5 short blasts and a long blast. 5 being, please signal your intentions. I'm not sure that your actions to avoid a collision are sufficient. And the long blast is a warning signal, obviously. So we keep going down the harbour. Down the bottom left, you can see the speed of the ferry here, that is doing 14.2 knots. So he's motoring along, and you can see the skiff's coming out from his starboard side here. So somebody pointed out last week, well, why doesn't the ferry slow down? It's not slowing down. But you'd also obviously know from the coal regs that the obligations of the stand-on vessel master is to maintain course and speed. So that's basically what he's doing. And as we go along here, you can see the skiffs keep going. The runabout that just went across the front was actually one of the ribs associated with the fleet too, so well within the 200 metres also. So we go on a little bit further, and the skiffs go and they keep going. So they're just starting to start coming out of Double Bay here. We're sort of at this point. It's probably just past Clark Island. We'd be just past the beam of the ferry, and about this point we get another very fast, sharp 5 blasts of the horn. Like, ferry does a bit of a slight deviation to starboard at the last second. And here we go, just cruising along the harbour, everything's good, it's not a problem. So, the estimated distance between the bow of the ferry and the stern of the 18-foot skiff was about 15 metres. Ferry at 14 knots is doing 7 metres per second. So they're about 2 seconds away from being munched. So the footage kept going, but basically that was the important bit that showed the situation, okay? That's a good example of why we need to get out to the clubs and talk to people and make sure that things like this don't happen. Last year, we had the last week of the season. Basically how it works is that we get reports from ferries, we get reports from Sydney ports. There's a ship coming into the harbour at high speed, as you can see. Very fancy. A little bit further for me. Keep going. A little bit further. There you go. We'll hold there for a minute for me. Okay. We get footage from from the Sydney ferries, from the police. We take our own footage and that sort of thing. You may be surprised to know that there's about 25 CCTV footage cameras around Sydney Harbour. A lot of them have been put in recently since ports moved down to Botany and now do everything remotely by radar and by camera and through AIS plotting and that sort of thing. And also since the incidents we had a few years ago where we had 6 deaths off Bradley's Head and the other 4 that we had underneath the bridge from the Marinda, and there was a previous one as well from the Titty under the bridge, is why we've got the transit zone there now. But you can see in this one, this is taken from the bridge of the ship. Fairly calm sort of day. Little yacht just off the bow here. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Clansman. Clansman's 30 foot, older style, sort of, now what you say, I suppose, a cruising yacht. In its day, they were pretty high tech, I suppose, back in the 70s. But this little Clansman you can see going into the bow, he was taking part in a race which was being run by one of the clubs on the harbour. Their start boat had just gone past and said, "We're abandoning the race, the wind's too light, we've got a ship coming down the harbour, so the race is abandoned." You can see just off here, the little orange boat is the pilot vessel, the escort vessel of the ship that's been going ahead and talking to the vessels. He actually stopped and talked to the people in this yacht that's just off the bow of the ship. But they were from Lake Macquarie and they didn't understand that the ship was actually going to turn around Bradley's Head. I don't know whether they thought it was going to keep going, but they thought it was going to keep going straight ahead basically. And they saw the escort vessel and they saw the escort vessel go off that way, but they didn't assume that they would follow the escort vessel for some reason. But yeah, if you can just go a bit at a time, you can see how close it kind of gets. And there it is coming across the bow. And that one was about 25 metres. And the Clansman's probably going about 2 knots. The ship is doing 8 knots. And as you know, ships don't stop on a dime. Even the Manly ferry takes 45 seconds and 400 metres to do a crash stop. Ships, on the other hand, take obviously a lot longer than that even, and the momentum behind them. We actually got some really good footage as well from the tug master that was down here on the starboard side, just as the yacht appears across the bow of the ferry. Yeah, so at the closest point, there was about this much at the top of the mast of the Clansman visible from the bridge and the ship. Okay, so that he's seeing the top of the mast, not the hull of the boat. Okay, so another good example of why we're here. What I was saying, so last year, at the end of the season, the last week of the summer sailing season, we had the incident with the skiff, we had the incident with that yacht. They were on consecutive days. We had 4 yachts from one club cross between the escort vessel and a ship that was coming out of the harbour on a Friday night twilight. And on a Thursday afternoon twilight, we had another 3 yachts further up the harbour go between the ship and the pilot escort vessel. So that's one of the reasons why we come to talk to you guys. Is basically you're not only running the risk of getting run over and killed, is you're also running the risk of copping a fine, which the skiff scored a nice little $500 reckless navigation infringement, and also you're risking disqualification. When we get a call from the ports, as you can see, they've got pretty good footage, and they take photos from either from the escort vessel or from the ship itself, from the bridge, or from the tugs. It's pretty damning evidence of, yeah, there's a yacht here with a sail number in between the escort vessel and the bow of the ship, and that's basically what we use to then approach the club and say, we got this evidence, we got this footage, you need to deal with it, be it a disqualification, and basically that's how it gets dealt with. So if you're worried about starting your engine to get away from the front of a ship, you might get penalised in the race. It's a hell of a lot better than A, being run over and possibly damaging, injuring your crew and that sort of thing, or B, being disqualified from the race anyway. You're still going to end up in the same boat, but safely. So the message is basically get out of the way, but I'll go through a few things here. Just quickly, when you're out there, you need to know which rules you're operating under. So when you're racing, obviously you're under the racing rules of sailing, the ISAF regulations. When you're interacting with other vessels that aren't racing, or when you're just heading out there, you're out for a day sail, a bit of a cruise up to Store Beach to eat some prawns, whatever, you're operating under the coal regs. If you are involved in an incident whilst racing with another competing vessel, you need to report it to the club, and you need to fill out a vessel incident report, which they have here in the sailing office, and I'm sure it's on their website as well. It's It's only a 2-page document, pretty straightforward. Lodge it with them so they know about it. If it's a serious incident where you've got an injury, first thing you do is call OOO. Okay? That's much more important than a bit of paperwork to report to the club. Occasionally we get incident reports that come from insurance companies, whatever, saying that it hasn't been reported. If it hasn't come back and been reported to the club, we then go back to the club and say, as per your aquatic licence conditions, we need to see a copy of your report. And if they go, we haven't got a report, there was no protest, there was nothing lodged, we start to ask them why they're not meeting their aquatic licence conditions. When we start to go down that road, it gets ugly. Okay? We don't really want to go down that road. We'd like everybody just as, ideally, if you report the incidents, it stays with the club. Great. If we do get a call from an insurance company, we call the club. Best case scenario, I go, yep, here's our protest form, here's the report. Beautiful. Put it in the file. Yep, happened in the course of racing. Tick, tick, tick. Educational purposes, statistics only, away it goes, gone. Unless it's an extreme case, then we may have to take some sort of follow-up action, interviews and all that sort of thing. Okay, so you need to know which rules you're operating under, and you need to know what the rules mean. Okay? If you're an overtaking vessel, if you're under sail, you are still the giveaway vessel. Okay? This one always brings a few laughs, and also it raises a lot of debate as to who was right, who was wrong, inside included zone, yada yada yada. We won't go down there, but so basically, the conditions I was talking about with ferries and ships. Any sea-going ships, you need to maintain 500 metres ahead. If there's an escort vessel in there, which 99.9% of the time there is an escort vessel these days going through the harbour, use that escort vessel as your point of reference. Don't pass between the escort vessel and the ship. If there is no escort vessel, then determine what you think is 500 metres and stay well clear. If you're not sure, tack away. Do it early, keep a lookout for them. Listen to Channel 13, all the shipping movements and reporting points down the harbour are broadcast on Channel 13 all the time. With ferries, it's 200 metres ahead and 30 metres around the sides and stern. Same with the ferries down the sides and stern, 30 metres. Okay. So there you go, a bit of a picture. So 30 metres either side, 500 metres across the bow, don't pass between the escort vessel and the ship. Pretty straightforward. Occasionally the escort vessel will go further in front when it's a really light day like we saw with our clansmen. They'll go further in front just so they can warn vessels that may be moving very slowly that will likely still be in the path of 500 metres. Quite often you'll see them actually slow down if they can see a group of yachts coming across. The pilot and the escort vessel are in contact with each other over VHF. The pilot, if he thinks that the yachts will get through, will tell the escort vessel to slow down and let them go across rather than have a bank up of yachts on the side of the vessel as well. Okay, so there will be times when they will wave you through, but listen to what they're saying. We don't want this. Okay. This one's from the UK, from Cows Week 2011. 5 naval officers on the yacht. Two of them end up with a drink of flat. This shot's taken from one of our patrol vessels that was doing an escort, one of the bulk carriers leaving the harbour. Not a bloody skiff. A few years ago. Then again, it's not always skiffs. Taken from the bow of Manly Ferry a few years back. Again, well within 200 metres of the bow of the ship. Probably within 20 or 30 metres. The ferries, the harbour ferries all carry the orange diamond, which gives them priority over sail. It's basically what you treat it as an exclusion zone in front of the ferry. So 200 metres in front of the ferry is basically a moving exclusion zone. You shouldn't be in there. Safe watermark. Especially when you're just cruising, please try and stay well wide of Bradley's Head. Especially if you're coming from, say, Athol Bay, going up to the harbour, say, up towards Mount or whatever. People cutting the corner there are putting themselves into the oncoming traffic which is coming down the harbour. These days we've got all the fast ferries, you've got the jet boats going around the corner, we've got all sorts of traffic. We've got Rivieras springing all over the place, you name it, everyone's out in the boat having a bit of fun out there. There has been some discussion over the years recently to possibly turn that area into a traffic separation scheme. What that would effectively do is make it illegal for any vessel to be passing or heading north between Bradley's Head and this marker. That would mean for you guys, a lot of your courses would have to change. It would also mean that basically between Bradley's Head and this mark, you'd end up with a continuing obstruction. Can you imagine the people calling water on something coming across on Port Tackett and Nor'easter, heading from Bradley's towards this mark, calling for water on a boat that may or may not be competing? It's going to cause chaos. Okay? It would also effectively make this a mark of the course, which is again a no-no for us. We don't want to congregate boats around it. So basically what we're asking for is a bit of common sense. Don't go close to Bradley's where you can avoid it. I know there's a beautiful lift up there in the Nor'easter. You know, everybody bangs straight out of Point Piper, straight to Bradley's. Beautiful lift, out we go. Lovely. But when you're looking at the ferry masters coming down and you're in a group of other yachts that are doing the same thing, remember you're looking at one ferry, that ferry's looking at a fleet of you guys, especially if it's a bunch of Etchells or something like that. I know you guys are all offshore sailors and you tend to spread out a bit more, but effectively you need to keep the thought about what's happening in the heads of the other masters and that sort of stuff. But, yeah.
So you're effectively asking people across the channel if they're coming from the west of Bradley's.
If you're coming from west of Bradley's, don't go close to Bradley's. Coming say.
If you're going towards Manly, you've got to cross the channel to go around that.
Yeah, correct.
So you can cross the bow of ships coming into the.
So you're going to be crossing the bow of anything.
Not if you're short tacking at Bradley's, which is what most people do.
If you're short tacking up Bradley's, you're going tack, tack, tack against the oncoming traffic all the way along.
Well, no,
yeah.
Well, if you're in, but what I'm trying to say is you are going to effectively going to have to cross the bow.
Crossing once is better than tack, 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 4 times across. Traffic separation schemes in the English Channel. Infringements for traffic separation scheme breaches over there are fines in the order of £10,000 to £12,000. So I mean, we don't have that sort of clout. We don't really want to do it. Basically, what we're looking for is cooperation. The more people we can get to stick to the right of the channel, the better it is. If we can all play together in the sand pit together, life will be much easier.
This is probably where most of the blue water points for races actually start at night time. You actually clarify the owners here additional rules for night time because we're only one race, so that starts at
Yep, about to get to the night time zone. Yeah, sorry, there's something. So when you're night sailing, if you can display not use your tricolour when you're inside the harbour, it helps everybody else to see you a lot better as well. All you're using is a tricolour at the top of your mast. Other vessels that are navigating aren't looking up into the background scatter lights of the apartments and buildings around the harbour. They're looking along the water level to try and see other boats coming. So it's recommended to use deck level nav lights when you're inside the harbour. Love the tricolours when you're out at sea. That's great when you're going through the seas, through the swells. They're much more visible. But inside the harbour, if you can use your deck level nav lights, it's much more effective and you're much more visible. Obviously, part of your safety equipment when you're racing as well is you've got torches on deck. If you can use illuminate your sails, especially if you're out on your own and not in a group of yachts. When you're coming back into the harbour, if you're coming down the harbour at night, you've got fishermen going out, that sort of thing. If you can illuminate your sails a bit so people can see you, fantastic. It just helps everyone to see you. That's what we're basically aiming for. If you're under motor, your tricolour is basically illegal to use. You need to have your steaming light at least 1 metre above your side lights as per the call regs. So when you're under sail, these are the lights we'd like to see you using. Your port and starboard down on the bow and your stern light. And then when you're under motor, the addition of the steaming light as well. Okay, but basically, that's it. That's what we're after.
I have a question. Very important stuff. You need to be aware of what's going on in the harbour. Obviously, 7 days ago, I heard what you said. Again, very important. You also said you were involved in some paper. What I'm about to say has some resonance with you. March, and I was going to get an email, but I may as well talk about it. March of February of last year, short ocean race, blowing it hard, suddenly 30 knots gusting higher. I came down here thinking, okay, it's offshore, but a restricted sail race on the harbour. The harbour race was canned as well. The reason being, look, it's out of our control, it's our maritime licence. We can't start races above a certain level. Okay, that's the fact. My issue is that in a few months' time, we're about to go to Hobart. And we could be caught in Australian 60 knots in apprentices without training to get to that position. Now, to me, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. If you don't just go out sailing and we do the Hobart, people are going to die. So yes, there's regulations and we can't do this, but there must be some sort of compromise between the two.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah, good point. When you say that we're not letting you go out sailing, we're not letting you go out sailing. The Maritime is saying that it's not safe to run a race, and the risk assessment that's done by the clubs and their insurances are what's stopping you going sailing. Nothing's stopping you going sailing.
Well, it's carrying over.
That's
That's
no, I hear you, I agree with you. But
it's going to be a compromise somewhere.
yeah.
I'll leave it.
Any other questions?
So I've got another one. We had an incident, not an incident, but a situation. I sailed out of Manly with the Manly ferries on the weekend, and when there's a swell running through the heads, the Manly ferries tend to head out towards the sea and then change direction and come back to the Manly. It's very difficult to pick where they're going to turn and where they're going to go. How do we lie in that situation? Because it's almost virtually impossible to tell whether you're going to veer away and go behind him, and then he's going to turn down. It's very difficult.
It does make it hard to judge, and that's where a bit of common sense goes on both parts. Hopefully the common sense is coming from the master of the ferry is that he's not going to turn into the path of the yacht that's out there. Actually, happened to be one of my bodyguards is an ex-ferry master. So, Chris, do you want to say anything about that? Or?
Yeah, I've drove the Manly boats for a couple of years, and we always bear you guys in mind before we turn down. But what we're trying to do is watch the sets of the waves and try and pick one that we can, turn down to, prevent the roll or shit too much. You've got kids running around the vessel as much as you tell them to sit down, crossing their hands, they're still running around. So, and my main focus is obviously safety of our ship, but we do bear in mind what you guys. So, but again, if you're staying 200 metres away from us,
You have to signal detention, mate?
yeah, no. Signal for detention is when if you've got a risk of collision, okay, then you signal your attention by manoeuvring signals, so 1 to 4, 2 to start, 3 to stern. But if we're not at a risk of collision, we don't have to signal. But it depends. If you're saying I'm turning into you, and then there's a risk of collision, that's different.
Very responsive to change, so it's very difficult to work out where to go.
Yeah.
And it happens quite a bit, but it's just in the Is there a way you should go?
Well, obviously behind the vessel, if you can. If you're seeing us go into the waves, usually going about 45 degrees, and we're going up, you know that we're going to turn before we come down. So, if you're out here, obviously aim for us, and then just keep clear. We do bear you guys in mind. That's one thing that we always look at, but we are also looking at this as well when we can turn.
There are always going to be situations where different vessels interact, and that's one of the reasons we're here, and it's great to be able to get you guys as a collective. We don't have the ability to do that with people, groups like CYCA or whatever, because they're not, we don't have the ability, they don't have a licence, we can't get them in a group. We're not trying to browbeat you, what we're trying to do is work with you and just try to make things a little bit easier on the harbour so that everybody can coexist, basically. And it's hard for us to sit here and adjudicate on an incident that may have happened, with only part of the story, because part of the fact.
We'll move on now, and I'd like to call on the race chairman, David Jordan, to give us his talk about the requirements we require for next Saturday's race and also for the rest of the Blue Water Series. So David, you've got the chair.
Thank you, Vice Commodore. I'd just like to open by acknowledging and briefing. I'll be as brief as I can. Firstly, very encouraged to date by the paperwork and the entry requirements and your efforts to make sure that we have a seamless activity in that regard. A couple of points in relation to the SIs, just in relation to the entries themselves. conscious of the need to have 2 radio operators, 2 first aid, 30% of the crew being CYCA survival qualified, a declaration of crew certificates, experience 50% of the crew members, and the crew list information being supplied as requested at the sailing office. Delighted to say a lot of that is occurring. Also aware that things do happen in the world. Changes to crew list information through Top Yacht is all good. We must be advised to the sailing office directly within 6 hours of the start of the race if you do have changes. Please note that deletions we can handle quite well, but no additions please to be made to the crew after 1200 on Friday, the day of race, or 1600 for those races that commence on Saturday. Charts in paper 4.
Question there. What if something changes?
So you're entering in Top Yacht, yeah, and then within 6 hours of the race start, advise that directly to the sailing office. So if it's before 6 hours, you've entered in the Top Yacht, and it gives the sailing office an opportunity to check through that information. If it's inside that timeline, you need to contact the sailing office directly. Does that make sense?
Copy.
Charts in paper 4 to be carried on board. It'd be very helpful to have the right charts for the right race. Minimum number of crew, 5. Please be aware if you do go through a deletion process that 5 is the number. Onto radio and communication information. Conscious Dave Keller update on some comm stuff. But in respect of the race committee and the race conditions itself, the frequencies and channels are noted. What I would highlight is the need to go back to listening to 16 once we've finished our skids. We are on VHF, or we've had occasion to use VHF otherwise. Position reports are noted, and the need to call the beam Hornby when you're entering Sydney Harbour. SI 712, report your position in accordance with the SI there. Failure to comply on HF may result in the imposition of a penalty at the discretion of the race committee, having regard to the circumstances of the case. Any boat failing to report a position on HF without reasonable cause may receive a cumulative penalty as detailed in SIs. Please, any issues in relation to communications, conscious for the vast majority of the Blue Water Point School, we are within some other means of communication on HF, in particular mobile phone, please do call us. That may not obviate the circumstance or indeed a penalty, but it will provide a good measure for safety, and it will indeed offer some mitigation in relation to the race circumstance for yourself. A boat shall not pass Bird Island, Cabotry Island or Flinders Island at a distance of less than 1 cable. Just to clarify, cable being 200 yards. And I'll highlight that's not the middle of the island, right? If in doubt, chart data or mean low water springs measurement from the island links. For Flinders Island specifically, please, when you're 10 miles from Port Kembla and at all times while you're within 10 miles of Port Kembla, VHF channel 11, please. Vessels entering Port Kembla are restricted by their draft in terms of commercial traffic there, and not just their draft, but also their manoeuvrability channel. And as such, the yachts must give way. Any directions that you receive from a pilot embarked in one of the ships coming in or out, or indeed the harbour master or their assigned delegate, please, they must be acted on immediately. I acknowledge that indeed may require the use of motor or other arrangements which might fall out of race. We need to comply and we can sort out subsequently what may or may not have occurred in relation to motor position, etc. Please retiring, do notify Stephen or myself anytime, day or night. Please note that if we do need to activate search and rescue because you're not maintaining comms, because you have retired, then if that's been instituted due to your failing to make that timely contact, then you may be subject to action by the committee. Declarations. Please lodge declarations as soon as possible after the race to advise of compliance or non-compliance with the racing rules and the SIs. At the very latest, we need that by 10:00 on the working day after the race. But please, as soon as possible, assist. Last 2 points. In the advent, and I take your point, weather. In the event of adverse weather conditions or forecast, and I mean adverse weather conditions forecast, not just for harbour and start, I mean geographically across the race course and by time as well. Then any decision by the race committee to postpone the race will be made at 16:00 on Friday of the race or on the day of the race for the Saturday starts. And my final point, fatigue. Conscious that relative Hobart and other races, a lot of the blue water point score races are relatively short. I use that relative term in terms of distance. I do acknowledge that weather conditions versus our expectations and the relative shortness of the race can actually be a long race in terms of time. Please be very conscious of that in relation to fatigue, and I encourage your planning efforts to factor that. Don't go too thin on the water. That's all I have. Thank you. Take any questions or hold to there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I'd now like to ask David Kellett to come and tell us how to work our radio system.
Thanks, Vice Commodore. If you don't know how to work your radio, you shouldn't be here. Good evening. The CYC take their radio procedures very seriously, and many of you have done these races countless times, but there's several new sailors around, so we've got to go through all this. Through the cooperation of Marine Rescue New South Wales, we're again able to run the skeds from the South End Signal Station and through offshore when it's on station at the finish line. This year we've got several operators are going to conduct the skeds at various times. Dennis Doyle, Tony Kirby, Brad Kellett, myself will operate out of South Head, and Robin Morton will be present on the offshore. There will be additional marine rescue operators who will man the station 24 hours during the races. The frequencies will be conducting these races on 4483 and using VHF 72 as a backup. If you can't hear the radio relay on 4483, stand by on VHF 72 until we contact you. Sometimes with the races going south, it's difficult when you're in under the cliffs to get 4483. As I said, we'll maintain a 24-hour listening watch on 4483 and VHF 16. And as David said, all yachts must maintain a listening watch on VHF 16. And it works a lot better if the volume's up. There'll be 3 skeds a day: 0005, 0805 and 1605, when we will get all position reports. During the skeds, the atmospherics may be bad, and we may call on yachts who we have a good signal with to assist in relaying positions. Battery charging. With so many electronics on the boats today, there's a severe drain on the batteries please charge them before the skids. Time and time again we get a signal from a yacht, which, as I've said before, sounds like a fart in a bar. So just get up a half an hour early and switch the motor on and give it a bit of a tickle. It saves time for everybody. Likewise with the automatic tuners, several of you have radios with automatic tuners. And when the tuner kicks in, it's normally about halfway through the position. So during the tune-up period, a couple of minutes before the skid, just hit the transmit button so that your tuner's coming on. It saves us all time and we don't have to repeat the call. Please give your position on the first run through. We don't want to have hours of skids. We try and get them through, let you guys get back to doing what you do best as sailing. As usual, we'll broadcast a tuning call 2 minutes before the skid and then come in on the skid. We'll give any weather warnings at the beginning of the skid, then we'll go into the position reports, and at the conclusion of those position reports, we'll then broadcast the full weather for you when we have it to hand. When you're reporting your position, we know you're in the south and the east, so we don't require decimals. A simple 3645 15128 will do us nicely, thank you. Or wherever you are. We don't stand on too much ceremony, as you know. We roll through it pretty quickly just to get it all done. If you have any HF problems, make every effort to contact another boat on VHF to get the report in, and as per the sailing instructions, you may need to let the race director know. There's also a sailing instruction 7.14, which I'll draw your attention to, which is a transmission log. So I think it's something new, I'm not sure. But I noticed that when I was running through, so make sure you do that. If we have a problem and someone asks me a log, you might be bothered. Please be punctual and we'll get through these skids as quickly as we can. Anybody got any questions? No? Go ahead, one.
Is there a preferred call sign for you guys at Hornby Light or any time?
Just call CYC base and they'll answer. Right, CYC offshore. Thank you. At Hornby Light.
Just on entering the harbour and radioing into CYC offshore, should we use 72 or 443?
72 is preferable. Thank you.
Please, as I've said before, wait until you're around the corner and we have lines.
Yeah. A lot of people call with a gap or something. It's not a good signal from there. And it takes 1.5 hours to go to the corner. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, David, and I'm glad you all know how to work your radios. Thank you all very much for coming. All I can do is say, hope you all have a good race on Saturday. The weather forecast doesn't look all that kind, however, I know we'll work our way through it. And enjoy the rest of the season. These remarks tonight don't just refer to Saturday's race, it refers to all of the Blue Water Point Score series. So thank you very much for your attendance and enjoy your sailing.